Now, for the rest of the hour, and hopefully a little bit into the next, because I'm going to him a bit late here, is Jan Irvin. And I know a lot of the folks here in the office are big admirers of his work. And we post some of his reports up at Infowars.com and PrisonPlanet.com. Here's one. TV. Well, here's an article that breaks down a lot of what he talks about. TV is a psychosocial weapon. And this report goes through the admitted government studies where they admit they're putting you into a trance. And also the LVX system, ceiling lights, encoded internet data. Turns out that's also designed to manipulate the human brain. You know, that's how they hypnotize you, as a flashing light. Project MK Ultra, all of it. We're going to talk about this with Jan Irvin, right? Jan Irvin. I'm a little brain dead today, my friend. How about I call you Bob Irvin?
There you go.
But you're joining us via video Skype, Jan. Now you're Don Juan or Carl Jung.
There you go.
Describe yourself for people, because you've got a long bio. How would you like to describe yourself?
Well, I'm an author. I've written a couple of books on entheogens and religion. I run a podcast. I'm the curator for the official John Allegro website. He was a Dead Sea Scrolls scholar whose research was suppressed. I also run triviumeducation.com and helping people, which is a website dedicated to teaching people the trivium, which is a systematic method for deriving certainty to cut through the mind control system so that people can see how everything works, which is
You're talking about reality testing. You're talking about reality testing.
Right, yeah, and that's really what I would like to go into today with you, Alex, is the trivium method and how it's used in media against us to control the population.
Well, Bob Irvin, you've got the floor, and my name is now Bill Jones. So
I was thinking Christie.
Okay.
All right. Let me start off by asking you a question, Alex. What happens when you get a virus on your computer?
Well, you generally respond by going and.
Well, let me put it this way. What happens to the way the computer functions when you get a virus?
It stops functioning correctly because disinformation has been added in that destroys its proper functioning, and that's what happens when we bring in false systems, false ideas into our minds.
Brains. Yeah, exactly right. And there is an ancient system that was developed primarily by Pythagoras and Aristotle called the Trivium and Quadrivium. It composes the 7 liberal arts. And what they've done is since the 1850s, the trivium has been systematically removed from our education system. And many of us will remember your former co-host, Jason Burmas, and his partner, Dylan Avery, when they were on Democracy Now! With Amy Goodman and against Popular Mechanics. And if you go through that, there was a line of communication that fell through there that Jason and Dylan could have picked up on that Popular Mechanics was primarily using against them. They fell into a lot of the traps themselves. But what I want to do today is to show people basically how to install a mental antivirus system into their minds so that they can spot how this stuff is being used against them, spot the logical fallacies, and then keep the conversation directed specifically towards the topic in discussion. Now, for instance, with 911, we can make how can we make our arguments as solid as possible against attack? And let me just move my camera here. Sorry if that's going crazy.
No, Bob, please do.
And so with the 911 stuff, what we need to do is go back and we need to analyze our grammar before we come to our logical conclusions. What's happening to the quote-unquote truth movement is most of us are typically putting our logic before our grammar. We're putting our conclusions before we have sufficient data to back them up. And this is what the trivium is about. The trivium specifically is grammar, logic, and rhetoric, and it's always in that order. Now, not using the trivium is like putting logic before grammar is like trying trying to eat your food at a restaurant before you've seen the menu or ordered, or it's like trying to put a car together before you know what the parts are. Grammar is the parts. Grammar is the research. Like right now, I'm holding up a stack of papers from the Council on Foreign Relations that I got directly from the Council on Foreign Relations archives. And this is the grammar that I've been doing, or the research that I've been doing on the Council on Foreign Relations and specific functions that they're using or that they're manipulating.
And by the way, these social engineers are masters at their core writings generally have three meanings. And they have meanings for the general dumbed-down public. They have meanings for the outer councils in their groups. And then they have the inner meanings. And when you know how to read it, it's all hidden there in plain view. An example of that is Gary Hart wrote a letter to Iran, published it in the Huffington Post, saying, we staged terror attacks. We'll do it again. Just like 9/11, Gulf of Tonkin. You better do what we say. But he wrote it thinly veiled. So when he was then confronted about it, he first lied and said, I never wrote that letter. Then when he was confronted with the letter, he went ahead and admitted, okay, that is what I said. But it's almost like if you can't communicate with them and cut right to the chase with them, they will lie to you. But they have these weird rules that once you actually call them on it, a lot of times they'll be honest. It's a cult.
Right. And, well, see, what we need to do, Alex, is we need to defeat our enemy, we have to be able to break their ability to control us. And in order to do that, we have to take control, basically, of our own minds. And Leo Tolstoy once said that the printing press was a mighty engine for disseminating ignorance. And in other words, what I'm getting at is that literacy in and of itself is a form of slavery until a systematic form of critical thinking is practiced by the reader. Just being able to read, just having literacy is not a way for people to learn and to keep from being controlled. That's how they control people. The trick is learning a systematic method for thinking to filter through the information that's coming in via the five senses so that we don't get a virus and spread that virus to others as false information.
Let me give you an example of a virus and see if you agree, and then give the listeners a few other examples of this. When Obama comes out and says, this is not a war in Libya, this is peace, and it seems outrageous to have them do that, or when the TSA sticks their hands down your pants or puts you in a microwave oven and says this is safety, they mean to destroy logic. They mean to condition you to accept their false reality, and they're waging war against reality. They live in reality, the social engineers, but they want us living in literally this matrix where they have implanted all this disinformation into our brains. And so I would attack 9/11 and the fraud by saying governments have done this before. This is why governments do it. And then I would go through the impossibilities in the official story.
I would agree with that to an extent, but the first thing that we have to do, Alex, especially with regarding 911, is we have to gather all of our data first and make sure that all of our data is gathered. Data or grammar is also known as knowledge under the trivium. Okay, and then logic is understanding. So what we do first is we gather our data first. We remove the contradictions from that data, which becomes logic, before we express that information to others, which is rhetoric or wisdom. Edward Bernays, to quote him real quick, said that the conscious and intelligent manipulation of the organized habits and opinions of the masses is an important element in a democratic society. Those who manipulate this unseen mechanism of society constitute an invisible government, which is the true ruling power of our country. We are governed, our minds molded, our tastes formed, our ideas suggested, largely by men we have never heard of. This is a logical result of the way in which our democratic society is organized. In almost every act of our daily lives, whether in the sphere of politics or business, in our social conduct or ethical thinking, we are dominated by the relatively small number of persons who understand the mental processes and social patterns of the masses. It is they who pull the wires which control the public mind. And that's from the very first paragraph of Chapter 1. From Edward Bernays' book, Propaganda. That's correct. And so, what we're looking at is these elites use sophism. They use the trivium against us. And the way to fight the trivium being used against us is to learn the trivium. See, what they've done is they've removed the classical seven liberal arts from our education. The word liberal in and of itself, Alex, comes from the Latin liber, which means book. And in ancient Roman times, the slaves were not allowed to study the seven liberal arts of the
liberal means learned or books.
Right. And, well, exactly. And so the people, once you became freed from slavery in Roman times, the first thing you did was undertook a study of the Trivium and Quadrivium. Okay, so this is why book or liber and liberty are synonymous. Freedom means book. Okay, so people have to understand that their freedom is in the books. It's in the Trivium and the Quadrivium. Again, the Trivium is grammar, logic, and rhetoric, always in that order. And if it's given to you out of order, if logic is put first, for instance, that in and of itself is a system of mind control.
And that's why we see people who will seriously, you say, I don't want government-run health care. And they say, you don't like black people. And for us...
Well, that's what they're doing is that's a red herring right there. They're diverting the subject matter.
No, I know, but for those of us that can have basic common sense and a historical understanding, we see it as an asinine, actual form of racism, creating division, but we don't understand. They're hitting an audience that is so confused that they just believe the symbol of the spoken word makes it so, and so they're primed to accept lies and have no discrimination to be able to calculate information.
I would agree with that, but let's put aside what we would generally consider a common idea of critical thinking, okay? Because, see, to the elites, unless you have studied the Trivium and Quadrivium and you understand and can identify logical fallacies, both formal and informal, they don't consider that you have any system of critical thinking. In fact, those who don't have the Trivium are very easily mind controlled. So what we've been doing is we've been putting this information out to people to empower them. So it's basically like taking the red pill in the Matrix. Once you have the Trivium, you can see all of the logical fallacies that they use against you. And in fact, I launched a website recently called popupfallacies.com, and the second video that I put up there was Obama's the death of Osama bin Laden video, and Obama has a lie per minute rating of 9.5 lies per minute. And when you can actually see the fallacies coming at you during these presidential political speeches, etc., you can begin to realize how to apply this information right away. So what we have to do, Alex, we have to get people to understand the logical fallacies on a global basis right away.
Well, here's a logical fallacy.
This is the way to stop these people.
Absolutely, but here's a logical fallacy. I mean, on the face of it, if government is almost always lying or spinning, why do we then believe the next thing they tell us? And why do they use this mind control term of conspiracy theorist when we don't believe people that are certified liars? That right there is a blatant...
Well, a conspiracy theorist, labeling somebody a conspiracy theorist is an ad hominem.
Yes.
It's to get them to stop focusing on what you're saying, Alex, and to say, Alex is a conspiracy theorist. It's an appeal to ridicule, right? So instead of saying that, instead of dealing with...
And then they have the appeal to authority. And then they have the appeal to authority.
Well, you can use that too, but see, an appeal to authority is any appeal when you're using an expert to solidify a point, but, what you have to show that expert is an authority and that their integrity is not under question. But an appeal to ridicule, let's say that they are just say, Alex Jones is a conspiracy theorist. What that is it's an ad hominem attack or an attack on the man. They're not dealing with the specific information that you're dealing with or presenting, but it's also an appeal to ridicule, which is basically like saying Alex Jones is wrong because ha ha ha. You there?
Yes, I am. Mr. Irvin, say that again.
I was saying that an appeal to ridicule is like saying Alex Jones is wrong because ha ha ha.
Yes.
Okay, and so these are the logical fallacies, and there's about 22 of the most common logical fallacies. There's probably a couple hundred in total. If people want to go to the triviumeducation.com website, once again, Trivium, TRIVIUM, education.com, they can begin their study of the Trivium and this information right there on the website. And if people want to get involved in study groups, I recommend that they go to Richard Andrew Grove's tragedyandhope.com website, which is obviously named after Professor Carol Quigley's book. So, what we're trying to do is create a meme of giving this information back to people, the skills of critical thinking, the classical 7 liberal arts, because you cannot be free unless you have these tools. In fact, the American rebellion against England on the Canada Free Press website, this author, Kelly, I forget her last name, the other day, for 4th of July, she published an article right on this website that said that the American Revolution was based around the trivium. And people knowing how to think, knowing how to slice through these lies and get to the truth, either that or to know what needs more research to derive at that truth, it is essential. So, it is a big issue. Censorship in and of itself, there's censorship or secrecy is occulting information.
Yes, it is. Occult hidden. Jan Irvin is our guest. I'm Alex Jones. The websites are Infowars.com and PrisonPlanet.tv. We'll be right back on the other side. Long segment coming up.